All right, here goes.
This is a Two Fat Guys Pull List podcast.
But when they launched Absolute, and I've been reading, obviously we've only, at this time right now, we've only got Batman and Wonder Woman, Superman coming. Those things jazz me up. Like, it's a new take. They're super fun. They're different attitude. And my only concern is just let them breathe. Let them do their thing. Don't throw them into the next, because you as a DC reader, there is a crisis event just around the corner.
Bingo.
Like, it's coming.
God Snyder is going to do a crisis event in the next 5 years. No doubt that is going to, tie together the mainline and Absolute universe.
Right.
No doubt in my mind.
Origins of superpowers are always very interesting.
There's more to them than meets the eye.
We're opening the magnetic field.
Your real training begins now. Ready?
Stand by alert.
What up, comic fam? It's Jim from Two Fat Guys Pull List, and you're watching the very first episode of Secret Origins, where we interview comic book artists, writers, podcasters, and content creators to talk about the one thing that we absolutely love that just takes up all of our time, all of our free time, and that's comics. And I'm joined by Blaine from Comiclub Podcast. Blaine, how you doing?
I am doing good. Thanks so much for having me. It is so nice to be a guest for a change as opposed to the host. I know how it is, kind of like running the show and kind of keeping it organized and keeping the conversation flowing. And here I am, I get to answer questions now, so I'm happy.
Hands-free for sure. All right, well, before we start the show, or before we start the main bulk of the show, the thick of it, we're going to do a little bit of a calibration, if you will, just to kind of relax, just kind of feel the vibe, and just get the show going. So I'm going to ask you a couple, 5 questions, maybe 6, just to kind of see where we go. Cool. So your first question is going to be, who writes better comics, DC or Marvel?
DC.
Okay. All right.
Do you want me to expand?
No, we'll get into it. There's other questions, but
later.
I like it.
This is
I like
rapid fire.
it. Yeah, for sure. Do you think manga would be better in black and white or actually colored?
Black and white.
All right, cool. Our other host Nate would disagree, but he's wrong on that. When you pull your comics on Wednesday, do you read them all at once or do you spread them out through the week?
Oh man, I try. If I had it my way, I'd read them literally all on Wednesday night, and I used to do that. I'm usually finished them by the time the next Wednesday rolls around, but ideally all at once.
There you go. All right. And our last, we'll do one more question before our last question. Who, in your opinion, is the best Batman actor?
Batman actor? I'm gonna go with Christian Bale. I'm a big The Batman fan, but I don't know if we've seen enough of Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne. And I know your question was Batman, not maybe Bruce Wayne, but I love the Christian Bale Bruce Wayne. That's what seals it for me. I'm not as crazy on his actual Batman and Batman voice as much, but I just love that actor so much, and I think his Bruce Wayne is great.
Yeah, he definitely grew on me. At first, it was a little jarring when he first debuted his Batman voice, but it grew on me, and then I went from there.
But yeah, I mean, again, we're gonna have more The Batman film series, but that one is super high on my list, and I could see Pattinson being number 1 soon. So I'll hold it to reservation.
I still haven't seen it. I have not seen that movie. I'm kind of behind on my superhero movies. I just saw Deadpool Wolverine.
Got it.
And everyone's been talking about it. So
that's good. That's cool. You no excuse for the Batman though. You gotta check out that one.
I'll get on that. All right, our last question, and it's an odd one. Is oatmeal a soup?
I wouldn't call it a soup. I'd consider it a slop. It's not a soup. It's a slop. It's just not a soup. It's not the way I make it. Not watery enough in my book.
Yeah, when I asked that question to my wife, she was like, "Well, it's like an oat." I'm like, "Yeah, but soup's warm. It's kind of liquidy. It might be a soup, like a sweet soup, maybe. I don't know. It's a question that I feel like needs more attention. So just had to get it out there.
Mine, whenever I make mine, if it's too watery, I will literally add more oats to it, and I like it to be less liquidy,
more thick. Yeah,
yes.
I gotcha. No, that totally makes sense. All right, cool. That is the calibration section of the show. Let's go ahead and get into the thick of it. So
let's do it.
First question would be, what was the first comic that really made you fall in love with the medium?
Sure. So I wasn't the biggest comic reader as a kid, like they were. I would go look at them in the grocery store and stuff like that. And I picked up Wolverine, I picked up all the cards and stuff like that. But it wasn't until college. And the one that really stands out to me is Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. And it was just kind of one of those, like, I didn't know you could do that kind of things, where you're just like, this is what comics is. Like, I just kind of always assumed it was superheroes, the big two, obviously. That's most people's kind of like outside interpretation of what comics are, is just superheroes. And The Sandman is in the DC universe. It's a Vertigo book. So it incorporates, like Justice League Scarecrows, like in the first arc and stuff like this. But it's playing on a whole new layer of mythology and, literary. It's very literary, and it ties into a lot of like our myths and even like Shakespeare and stuff, as me as an English major was really digging. So that's the one where I was like, just blew me away, read it start to finish. It took a while because it's a lot of issues, but I just love that comic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I I don't know if through the show that we've been doing on the podcast with Two Fat Guys Pull List, me and Nate are both relatively new to the medium. Like just like you as a kid, I'd go to Half Price Books or the grocery store and see them on the stand and just kind of fiddle through them. I think in college, I think I dabbed in the Blackest Night series. Like, it was just something that was going on. And
sure.
Jumped over to the shop and I was like, oh, this is cool. But I'm right there with you. Like, when we jumped into it a couple years ago and I was reading, Thor and Superman and all that. And then, I think it was Silver Coin. I can't remember. There was a comic, an indie comic that came out, and I looked at it and I'm like, wait, this isn't superheroes, and you jump into it and you're like, holy crap. Like, the medium is so wide, and to be that naive is just kind of silly, but like, you just don't realize it.
And then, I mean, the thing I'd add on that, though, too, is there's one is just like the expansion of genres. Okay, yes, comics can really be any genres. It's a medium. And then so there's romance, comedy, horror. There's all the genres. But then there's kind of like the other mediums can't do that kind of factor. And that's what Sandman kind of did, is like whenever they announced like the Sandman adaptation, there's still so many adaptations where I'm just like, okay, give it your best go. And, let's introduce more people to this. But the best version of this will always be the comic, because of the way you turn a page and the panel layouts and the way it delivers information is done in a way that a film or TV can't do. And that's coming from like a massive like film fan. So, there's pros and cons to all of it.
Yeah. I always find that interesting with, and we'll get to it later on the adaptation of comics to movies, but just seeing the creative direction sometimes with movies coming from comics and, oh, well, they left this out, or, you would think that they would have a better grasp at potentially portraying that panel or that big splash page. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it doesn't translate. Sometimes it does. Sometimes they do a great job at it.
Totally.
Next up, what are some of your favorite comic book stories of all time, maybe outside of Sandman?
New for me, and I am just in a big Alan Moore phase right now. Like, he's always kind of like the consistent writer that I return to, but he's got so many comics that that like I haven't read them all. And so last year we did a series on our show. We called it Miracle Man Summer, and it's reading Miracle Man. It's literally like basically the first comic he wrote, and there's 3 volumes of it. He wrote it in I was gonna say Wizard magazine. It's not Wizard. It was a serialized in like 8-page chunks, and it is incredible. It's a deconstruction basically of the character, Shazam or Captain Marvel, but the British version is called Miracle Man, and highly, highly recommended. Another comic I have, and this is one I often recommend to new readers, I'm sure you get this a lot as a person with a comic book podcast. Like, what do I read? How do I want to get into comics, which I do. Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim to me is the perfect marriage of fun kind of superhero-y video game. Like, it has kind of like fantastical world, and that it's not real. People like get punched into coins and stuff like that.
Right.
You got comedy, which is really, I find, hard to pull off in comics. There's not a ton of funny stuff, and there's more in my mind whenever I'm reading stuff. Like, I'm kind of groaning more, like, oh, that didn't land. Scott Pilgrim's like laugh out loud. And then it kind of is a bit of the manga vibe as well. It's a Western comic. It's a Canadian creator, but it has this sort of manga black and white feel. And then, I mean, he's done it in color too. So the original came out in black and white. They've done it in color. highly recommend Scott Pilgrim. I think it's good for, guys and girls, anybody, because it spans kind of across genres in a big way. And then I have one more for you, Planetary. And so I'm going to kind of mention some creators here, like Neil Gaiman is kind of in the process right now of getting a little bit canceled. Warren Ellis is, he ran into some issues a bit ago. So, outside of that stuff, I recognize the problems with a lot of these creators. But Planetary is one where I had revisited this kind of a little bit late as well. And it just blew me away. I checked out the Absolute Edition from the library. And if you don't know, it's this team of 3 who are characters who are exploring the multiverse. And each issue is kind of a one-shot as these characters explore like a new thing in this multiverse. And it's a history of comics. You go from like Doc Savage, the Golden Age. He touches the Fantastic Four, but they're not our Fantastic Four. They're a version of them. Godzilla stories, all just visiting all these stories that makes comics like memorable over the years. And it's like this perfect, in my mind, like love letter to comics from like, again, the pulpy, almost shadow of like Golden Age or even pre-Golden Age stuff to now in like the Dark Ages and the modern age. And I find it to just be like that's a masterwork of art right there. And it's John Cassaday on art. I mean, he's incredible.
But I love that when comics give you that just that sense of bewilderment and world building, jumping into what I'm reading now, like when we, like, again, just harkening back to like when me and Nate started the show, we'd go to these shops and like I'd pick up, when Donny Cates was writing Thor, right? And you read a classic Thor run and it's what it is. It's a classic Thor run. But when you read Donny Cates' original, like just the first couple arcs of his Thor, the only thing I could describe it as was just like metal. It just was metal. It felt different. It just wasn't a classic take on Thor. And I love that feeling when you just feel completely like you finish an issue and you want more and you have to wait the next month. Like that's the best feeling in comics, in my opinion. So when you can find a story like that, you got to hold on to it tight. Do you have a preference between obviously Marvel, DC, or Indie, or do you enjoy the mix? You said DC earlier, but now we can kind of expand on that.
I said DC because it was the one I clicked with most. And I think what makes DC so great is its standalone kind of graphic novels. It has a library of stuff that is popping off right now because of Compact Comics. So if you're in our world, they're putting out these kind of $10 collections of some of their best work. And they have graphic novels in terms of like a start, a middle, and a finish. It ends. It's not pure serialized. Where over at Marvel, everything is constantly serialized and there's not as much like Elseworlds out of canon stuff besides What If. And they don't really, it's not really a big thing anymore. So for that reason, I think DC is more approachable, even though I think people would probably argue the opposite just because Spider-Man is such like a touchstone of, kind of like, young boys who grow up and then, or if you're in Spider-Gwen, young girls or whatever it is, it's like, oh, this is me. I'm a nerd and I can, do super heroics and I'm juggling all my responsibilities and stuff. And it's set in, a city that I actually recognize as opposed to a fantasy place. But I just think DC has I think they let their creators really push more. And I think we're seeing that a lot in Black Label right now. Is it's less like you're confined to this canon. And you got people over at Marvel like Jonathan Hickman who can really, really push the boundaries inside of that canon. But what DC allows you to do is these Elseworld stuff where you can just be like, okay, well, what about Batman Year 100? Okay, what about Dark Knight Returns? Okay, what about, and then that's why you get these classic stories that you can just hand anybody. You can, and then again, that's what makes DC Compact Comics. And then one more thing I'm going to throw on that, big diatribe is the multiverse. Marvel beat DC to the cinematic multiverse. And now we're kind of in this conversation of like, is multiverse played out? Like, are we all sick of multiverses at this point? My answer is never. I love the multiverse. I think it's just the coolest concept. I love it in any sort, everything everywhere all at once. I love it in any sort of medium and approach. And I think the way DC has handled their universe, I mean, if you know the history in the early days, the reason they had to do these multiverse and crisis events is because how complicated comics are. And they would buy, we bought the Fawcett comics and we bought this and let's combine them together in Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's getting too complicated. Let's put them all together. And then, oh no, this timeline is too complicated. Let's expand them again. There's 52 Earths and that's Infinite Crisis. And they keep expanding and contracting over and over. And, I guess there's a, repetitive nature to that. But I'm a sucker for the Crisis books. And I think the multiverse, especially under like a Grant Morrison, where he maps it all out, and I can literally look at like, oh my gosh, like Earth 7 is like the vampire Earth. I remember reading that and blah blah blah. Like I love that stuff.
Yeah, I think and I think me and Nate talked about this in our last live show, but DC is so new to us, so like it can be a bit confusing, like when we get into that, like like here's this Crisis event, but it didn't happen before this and all that jazz. But now they've got their Absolute line. And I use the term new reader very lightly for me because this is like my 6th year into it, so I'm probably not a new reader anymore. But when they launched Absolute, and I've been reading, obviously we've only got Batman and Wonder Woman, Superman coming. Those things jazz me up. Like it's a new take. They're super fun. They're different attitude. And my only concern is just let them breathe. Let them do their thing. Don't throw them into the next, because you as a DC reader, there is a Crisis event just around the corner.
Bingo.
Like it's coming. And so at
Scott
some point,
Snyder is going to do a Crisis event in the next 5 years. No doubt that is going to, tie together the mainline and Absolute universe.
Right.
No doubt in my mind.
I mean, Buster Gold in the tie-in or whatever, the main all-in book,
right?
I mean, he's literally the linchpin. So like it's coming.
Yes.
So can we just have like maybe 3 years? Can you push it to 5 and then let's have some fun?
Totally.
But no, I love that. Let's say this. How has your reading taste evolved since you've gotten into the hobby?
I think I mentioned kind of whenever I started, I had almost kind of a disdain for the big two whenever I was like into the Sandman. Disdain might be a little hard word, but I was kind of like, I looked at it very like, oh, these monthlies are weak. Like, you got to give people time to tell a real story like Sandman. But I mean, at the end of the day, those were monthlies too. And you know what I mean? That's why they had shifting art and stuff like that. That was my early phase. And then I just became a, Wednesday warrior, where it's just like everything I was reading was just the monthly books. And then I kind of stopped and dropped my sort of classic series. I dropped my graphic novels. I dropped reading like a lot of that stuff because it's a lot to keep up with. And you see people, you're a creator on TikTok too, doing like the it's New Comic Book Wednesday, everybody. Here's my fat stack. And I'm just like, I'm like, how do you have time to read that much? And then like, how do you keep it all straight in your mind? I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about other creators. And then you just don't have time to read what I would call more like the classics and the iconic runs. And I think there's something so magical to serialized stories of just every month they're cranking it out, deadline be damned. And I love that. But to answer your question, the kind of inception of Comic Club is, and this is probably jumping on one of your upcoming questions about our podcast, is like, I had reread Watchmen at one point, and I was just, again, head blown open. And I'm just like, we got to give these creators the time and space to create something that will stand the test of time. And Watchmen got delayed because, it took a long time. Alan Moore is a genius. But like, I am at a point now where I'm always trying to cull and shorten my monthly Wednesday pulls. I'm trying to keep it to the essentials so that I have time to read the classics. And I mean, like currently, I mentioned Miracle Man last year. Currently, I'm reading Swamp Thing. And I had read like the first trade a bit ago. And I'm talking about Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. Currently, we're doing all of Swamp Thing right now. And I'm just like, it's time. It's time to read these iconic runs. And they hold the test of time for a reason, right? So many of these monthlies that we read are just they'll do a first trade paperback, and then they'll maybe do a second printing one day, and then we'll never hear from them ever again. They'll live on Comixology or whatever digital app there is, but that's just how it is. But as comic readers, we're so stuck on this completionist thing. Like I have to know everything about Booster Gold. I need to know, I have to know every single thing. And even if I don't like this current Daredevil run, I feel like I have to read it because I want to know what happens to the character. And it's not a quality judgment anymore. It's a completionist thing. And it's our own problems that we have there. And so that's kind of like my, like, you know, one of my messages out there, you know, is just like read truly what you love. You'll figure out the rest. Like it's, you'll figure it out. Like I love Daredevil, and there's just times where I don't read them and I jump on and they reference things that happened under a previous creator. I can figure it out. We're all smart people. It's not that complicated.
I think I had that problem with the most recent X-Men run, or with the Krakoan Age. You know, like we all just kind of dived really deep when Hickman created the Krakoan Age, and we were like, oh my God, this is brand new. And we wanted to know exactly. We wanted to know everything. And he was teasing it, right? He had the data pages. You got to go check this out. And it felt fun at the beginning. And I jumped on that very late. And then when it went towards the end, I was questioning myself. I'm like, why am I reading this? Like, this is not good. Like, it's just not. I think, you know, I believe Kieran Gillen had a monumental task of trying to end that thing, landing it properly. And he skidded, and it wasn't his fault. I mean, it was so bloated. And now we're into this new phase of X-Men where it feels almost the same way. Like we've got 15 million different types of X-Men comics. It's
unreal how bloated it already is.
Yeah, and it's like I'm already paring it down. I get one issue in, I'm like, nah, I'm out. I'm good. Like I'm sticking to these, and the ones that really drive me, the ones that make me feel like we were saying before, just encapsulates me and makes me want to go get the next issue. I'm gonna stick with that run.
Yes,
and I think it's okay to say I don't have to get them all. You don't have to get them all.
I mean, the comic companies don't want you to think that. They want you to think that every single tie-in to Blood Hunt matters.
Mm-hmm.
Blood Hunt was like 5 issues or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They want you to think that not only do I need to buy those 5 issues, I literally need to buy every single tie-in. And the answer is no, you don't have to. If you like it and it's interesting to you, or you like that creative team or whatever it is, go for it. But I'm right there with you. Like I'm reading the 3 mainline X titles. I'm about to drop one, and I don't read any of the other ones because it's not hitting for me.
It's not hitting for you. And to be honest, like you said before, the wallet and what's in it is real, and you want to make sure that there's plenty in there.
Yep.
All right, let's jump over to adaptation. So what is your take on the comic book adaptation in film and TV? Do you think it's oversaturated, or are you one of these people that, like, quite honestly, like me, I'm just happy it's there? Just kind of like with Star Wars, like I'm just glad we get Star Wars in that kind of adaptation. I'm just glad that we get comic book movies.
Oh, it's a tricky one because we're at a really weird place, and it's not just a weird place in comic book adaptation. We're in a really weird place in film in general. And I kind of mentioned being like, you know, a cinephile, and I will admit to bordering on like snobbish and like film bro takes, where I'm kind of just like, this looks like garbage. Like, go watch a real movie, people. You know what I mean? Like, sort of thing. But, you know, I was in the thick of it with everybody else for the MCU, you know, ride or die, going so hard. And there's just no denying that we've hit a weird transition place. A lot of things just didn't work out for, I'll just talk about Marvel real fast. Didn't work out for Marvel in unfortunate and weird ways. I mean, their next Avengers team was going to be like propped up by Captain Marvel, who just didn't hit with fans. Black Panther, who just had a tragic, passing out of their control. And then you got, what is his name? The Time guy, the bad guy,
Kang,
Kang, who then was embroiled in his own, real world issues that is impacting the movies. So MCU has dealt a weird hand in a lot of ways. And I think they're doing their best they can there. I think X-Men is their sort of ace in the hole. You know what I mean? I think they put a lot of weight on Fantastic Four too, and I'm really hoping Fantastic Four will be good. But Fantastic Four are lame. Let's face it. That's one of my hot takes. Is like, I'm not saying you could have bad Fantastic. I'm not saying you could have good Fantastic Four comics. There's a lot of great Fantastic Four comics. They're just lame. They're kind of lame. Honestly, Superman is kind of lame too, but he's awesome. And I think DC has so much going for it right now. I haven't been as excited about comic book movies as sort of the DCU under James Gunn.
I think they have the most opportunity right now, just because one could say that they don't have anything to lose, right? Like they have James Gunn on the ballot in the sense of like he is the creative direction. My only concern about with DC is don't let any of the top execs get their hands in it. Let him do his thing. It's the same thing with the comics.
Yep.
Let him cook, because I'm super excited about it. I just hope that we just don't get someone saying like, yeah, but I really want a giant spider. I'm like, no, that's not part of it. Like just let him do his thing.
Totally. I mean, and then I guess like outside of that, like, there's some cool stuff. I mean, like listen, I'm a comics fan. I'll take it all. And I like judge it all. There's there's a Scott Pilgrim manga show that came out last year. There's an upcoming show called Criminal based on Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips's like indie book Criminal. And so there's still like the medium can transfer really, really well. And there's a lot of meat on that bone there to do some great adaptations. And I love them. Like again, I'm a sucker for it and I'm here for it. If you told me that we would live in this world that is overtaken by comic book movies whenever I was younger, I wouldn't have believed you. But I'm happy we're here. I don't know if we'll ever get back to like the in-game style of just like, this is the culture. The culture is comic book movies. Sorry, the film kind of culture and adaptation culture. It seems like video games are kind of coming for that belt in a lot of ways, video game adaptations and stuff like that. But I think the medium is so vast that, you take a comic and that's your storyboard, you know what I mean? Like for your movie. So I think we're still going to get plenty of great stuff in the future. I'm still super hopeful.
You did controversial take, and I loved that. I think your other controversial take was that Fantastic Four sucks. Like if Nate were here, his pants would be on fire. But that's okay.
You want me to throw off a couple more at you?
Sure, go for it. What's some more controversial takes on comics?
So I just wrote down a couple because you sent over some questions in advance, and these aren't like, I'm not trying to be a hot take artist over here. And again, Fantastic Four don't suck. They're just kind of lame. They're a family. Families are like you're a father. I'm a father. It's like our lives just aren't as kind of cool. Having said that, here's my other takes. Omnibuses suck to read. And like, I think I don't know how people read these things. They're gigantic. You have to like sit at a table and open them to read them. And I don't know about you. I read in bed or like laying down or seated, like in a comfy chair, and holding an omnibus is insane to me. And whenever I see these TikTok accounts, no shade because, everybody, listen, read comics however the hell you want. I'm not here to judge you. I just think they suck. And then this is just another one. Deadpool and Venom. I said Fantastic Four are lame, but Deadpool and Venom suck.
Okay.
They all right. Great designs. Really cool designs, guys.
Yeah.
We love it. When I was in middle school once, I used to be an artist, and I would sit there and draw Venom with his tongue and his bulking muscles. But I don't get the appeal, and the fact that like half of like the Marvel line right now is Venom stuff. I'm just like, what is going on? Like, I don't get it.
No, I can definitely see the Venom thing, and I think we said that on our last show. Venom just to me is not. Donny Cates' run was really good, and I really didn't know much about the character, to be honest. And then when it ended, and somebody else picked it up, I think it was Al Ewing. I was like, oh yeah,
he's still on it, if you can believe it.
Yeah, like I love Al Ewing. I read it, and I'm like, this is not good. I don't like it. It's not fun. So I totally get that. Deadpool, I love Deadpool. I just like I really enjoy like the breaking of the fourth wall, talking to the reader, talking shit about the publisher or the studio. I fucking love that. Like that's just me. That's just something I like. And
totally.
So, but to each their own. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about Comic Club Podcast. So just talk a little bit about how it originated.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this earlier. And again, I was like a Wednesday warrior who I reread Watchmen, and I just had this moment in my mind of like, what am I doing? It's like, I feel like somebody who had like you know, like all I was doing was like watching like reality trash television, and then like, you know, somebody put like Citizen Kane in front of me or something like that, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can see, or like I just like somebody put glasses on me or something like that. Like I was just like, this is a comic. And I just said to myself, I don't spend enough time hitting up the classics, hitting up the graphic novels. And I don't know about you as somebody who's gotten into comics for 6 months, but I got to say, as like a comic reader from, you know, it's probably been around 15 or 20 years now. Like I was never in really a community and could talk to people. Luckily now we have TikTok and podcasts and stuff like that. Before then, I would go in the shop. I was probably a little too shy back then to actually talk to people. I eventually made friends with like the shop owners, but I had nobody to talk to comics about. And I would be like out at a party in my 20s or whatever, and somebody would like, you know, have a Hellboy tattoo or whatever it is. And then in like literally the rest of the night, I'm just sitting there talking comics, because like two comic fans found each other. Like we're so rare, right?
Yeah.
Like back then, but before like pre-MCU, it was just like you didn't know anybody who read comics. And so my buddy Adam, who is the co-host of my podcast, that's just our thing, is I'm going to read these comics anyway. Why not fire up a mic? It's a reason to, you know, regularly check in. We don't live in the same city anymore. We're good old buddies. And it's a great just reason to just, let's revisit classic comics that we always wanted to read anyway, and just talk about them on the pod. So that's kind of the origin.
Is there anybody currently that you want to guest on your podcast or just love to get on?
I've been talking about doing more interview pods for so long. And, you know, our show is truly just like two friends talking about graphic novels as a book club. I have had one interview and like, you know, dabbled in a couple others. This creator named Simon Roy, he's a Canadian, you know, cartoonist who is fantastic, highly recommended. But, you know, I mean, like, it's weird to say like who would, you know, dream, you know, Grant Morrison is probably like one of my favorite creators of all time, and having them on the pod would be unreal. I'd be probably like starstruck and very nervous, because they are incredibly hard to understand. If you've seen a Grant Morrison interview, they're so Scottish that it's like, it would be like, I'd be honestly be like, what? Wait, excuse me. But you know, it's Grant Morrison. They're the best.
If you could rewrite or retcon any storyline with, you know, indie, DC, Marvel, what would it be and how would you do it?
You know, I mentioned only reading what you love. There is an exception to that rule, and that's Batman for me. Like, okay. I say this often whenever I talk to people about comics. I'm just like, imagine your favorite TV show of all time, whatever it is, right? You know, Friends, Seinfeld, you know, whatever, The Office, Sopranos. Imagine it never ended, and every 10 years or so, a new creative team would like reinterpret it for a modern age. That doesn't mean it's always better. It means it's always changing and adapting. And for that reason, like the sequential nature of comics is so incredible for me. And I say this is like, I will be on my deathbed, like sick, infirm in a hospital. And like, I will have somebody go to the comic book store and bring me my latest monthly Batman comic, because I'm just going to be reading it forever. What makes me frustrated about Batman is when they do these weird, fantastical things. And I came with this example. I was like, Chip Zdarsky cut off Batman's hand recently.
Yes.
I don't even remember when it happened. I think it was when he was in that alternate Earth or something, but I don't remember the details of it. And then I was like, you know what? Scott Snyder, as Joker, cut off Alfred's hand, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, that happened too. And then all of a sudden, Batman has this mechanical hand, I think. Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah,
I don't know.
We'll get into it, but you are correct that did happen.
Yes.
But then it got retconned. And
it's already retconned?
It's already retconned.
But he had a mechanical hand for a while.
He had like a legit Iron Man hand that could do, like, had booby traps in it and like the whole fucking thing. Yeah. And then Absolute Power happened, and right before it happened, you know, Chip retconned it, and I'm very positive that it wasn't like, no, I want to do this. It felt like the publisher was like, Bruce has to have both of his hands, so like, just get it done. Yeah. And so what did he do in his what was it with the robot that had all of his personality? Failsafe made a clone of Robin, but he took Bruce's DNA.
That's right. I remember this now.
Oh my gosh, it was so frustrating. I was like, what are we doing? And then the dude was dying. So when they were at the exact same age,
Age.
cut his hand off and put it
Yes.
back on. I'm like,
I totally forgot about that. And so I answered my own question is I'd retcon the hand chopping off, and they've already done it, and it's just as stupid as it sounds.
well, like I think how I would approach it is I would have kept the mechanical hand, in my opinion. I think it would have been cooler for Bruce to have that ace up his sleeve or on his hand, whatever you want to say it, and be like, oh, my utility belt is literally on my hand. So like if I don't even have my belt on me and I'm at a party, like pew, I go up and that's it. Like that's freaking cool.
Not me.
And so so when they retcon, I guess it's an absolute thing, right? It's probably more of an absolute type of mechanic rather than current continuity line. But I remember when they retconned it, I was like, guys, we just got the hand. Like, what was the point?
There's just some decisions like that, and it's just like, listen, Batman is a legacy character. Are you going to have him have a robot hand the rest of his publishing history? No. Like, you always revert back to the means at some point. So don't chop his hand off. That's just stupid.
Yeah, I've run into that a couple times with our DC comics. Like, you just get these really weird. Sometimes they're unique and fun, but like they're gonna be gone in like 6 issues. Like it's just not gonna exist. I mean
that's the argument for deaths in comics, is just like we're all jaded in terms of like characters dying. I mean, Alfred's still dead in mainline DC continuity, and it's only a matter of time. But it just depends on how impactful and how much you can make it. That's the nature of comics. Is things happen, things will always get retcons, and things always revert back to the memes, right? It'll always kind of revert back to whatever. Now, if you can make it actually matter during that short time of them maybe dying or a hand being chopped off and people caring about it enough, then go for it. I'm not jaded in that way. It has to land.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. All right, Blaine. Well, let us let the audience know where they can find you, what you got coming up.
You can find me on TikTok. I'm grinding trying to grow the account, man. TikTok is hard, and I love your Wednesday pull list videos. They're super unique. They get me every time, and so just shout out to you there. But really, if you want to follow along, follow our comic book club. And like I said, each month we choose a new comic or graphic novel. We have 2 episodes each month. One is our first impressions, which is spoiler free. And we're kind of like, here's who it's for. Here's kind of like what it's about, blah, blah, blah. It's short, 15 minutes. And then we do a full spoiler deep dive where we go deep into the comic itself. Currently, we're reading all of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. So if that's ever been on your list and you're like, I want to do that, jump on in October. We just started publishing those, and we'll be doing it the rest of the year. And I'm just in the motion right now of creating our calendar for 2025. I know that Criminal is going to be on it. I've already mentioned that. And we're going to have some Fantastic Four on it. So I'm getting a little callbacks here because those are 2 things that, one, I've always wanted to read, or they're, important because of upcoming movie and TV show adaptations. So that's what you can look forward to in 2025 over at Comic Club.
Our viewers or listeners, they can find the podcast on like Spotify, iTunes, all that jazz.
All of it. Just search, Comic Club. That's, one word, I guess. It'll be, you'll have it on the show,
Yeah.
I'm guessing. And then, Comic Club Podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
All right. Well, Blaine, it's been my pleasure. I'm glad that you were able to jump on, and it was really fun.
It was. Dude, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you later.
Later.